So final exams period can be one of the most stressful and intense parts of the academic experience, most importantly for mental health, so let's talk about it. First, let's start high level here. There is no set of exams or exam itself that will determine your future. Whether or not you're in law, undergrad, medicine, dentistry, PhD, it matters less what exam you are going to take, and it matters more that you remember that whatever exam it is that you are going to take, even if you do not get the score you want, if you score a little bit lower than you would have preferred, or if you fail the exam, there will always be opportunities in the future for you to take another set of exams, retake the same exam for the most part. There are always exceptions here, but what's really important to remember is that although it can feel like everything is riding on these exams, it is not the case, and I can promise you that. I have many friends who failed exams, who had 2.0 degrees in undergrad and went on to Harvard Law School and did whatever they wanted in the future. Other friends who just dropped out of college, decided they wanted to be an entrepreneur, and did amazing things too. Do not fall into the trap of letting the exams define your worth, because that is only going to increase the pressure on yourself right now, and that's the last thing we want. I remember when I took the LSAT, my third year of undergrad, I was so stressed out over the exam. I had consistently practiced for 6 months, and eventually my scores were consistently in the 170s, which for me was very, very good. That's exactly what I wanted. But I stressed myself out so deeply because of the pressure I put on myself the night before the exam that I slept like 5 hours. And on the day of the exam, I was so flustered, I was so stressed, I missed a lot of basic questions that I otherwise wouldn't have missed. I ended up scoring a 170, which was amazing. But I know I would have done better had I just taken some deep breaths and remembered the bigger picture, which is that this one exam does not mean everything, and I could always retake it. But instead, I let the pressure get to me, I put the pressure on myself, and it hurt my exam score. So if nothing else, also keep in mind that the more pressure and stress you put on yourself, the more likely it is that you are going to underperform relative to where you want to perform on the exam. One last note here before we get into some tips and tricks to manage mental health in exams. A lot of the pressure internally on ourselves for performing on exams stems from a place of self-judgment and self-critiquing. We need to remember, and it's very important that you remember, you are your own best friend in this life. You are not your own inner critic. The inner critic and the self-judgment is always going to tell you should be studying harder, you should do better, you should do this, you should do that. It's ever more important in those moments to remind yourself that you are your own best friend, and your own best friend will tell you, look, try your best, focus, but don't burn yourself out into the ground. Nothing is worth that. Focus on your mental health and make sure that is in check, because without that, we have nothing, right? So remember that it's coming from a place of self-judgment, this relentless pressure and grind at the top. The first and arguably most important mental health trick that you need to implement during exam season is setting boundaries for yourself. Make sure you are setting aside time for yourself to let your brain rest. It can be very easy to fall into the trap of study, grind. I've been there. But it's very important that you give your brain a break. Your brain, like every other muscle in the human body, is a muscle. And muscles need time to relax and process all of that information that you are putting inside of it. The more often you give your brain a break, even if it's for 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, you need to close the laptop, you need to close the book, you need to give yourself a little bit of space, because it will refresh the way that you approach the material, it will refresh the way that you absorb the material, and that will help you study and get a better exam score in the long run. Now, I'm not here to judge. I drink coffee all the time, and that is fine, but try to switch up what kind of caffeine intake you take. And what I mean by that is, coffee is great, but I have seen in many cases, including for myself, that it can in some cases make anxiety worse, or just set your mood off, and it can do a lot of things. So try to substitute tea instead of coffee every now and then, just to switch it up, and again, give your mind a little bit of diversification in what you're doing, so you're not pushing relentlessly, because coffee can, as a stimulant, push you beyond your limit without you realizing it. So just be careful with that. Along the same lines of thinking, try to change up where you actually study. Studying in one place is good, and finding your way to focus and that groove is important. It's also important to refresh your mindset in a new location, even if it's the library, a cafe, a friend's house, whatever it is, even the living room, the kitchen. Try to change it up a little bit just to keep things interesting for yourself. Lastly, if you can, try to work on paper with analog rather than digitally using the screens. Everything is on the screens these days. TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat, YouTube, material, Zoom, everything is on the screens, and that's okay. But trust me on this, because I've learned this lesson the hard way many times. It is good to diversify how your brain is absorbing and looking at material, and it's just good for your mental health to change it up and look at paper and actually write on a notepad instead of typing. So to the extent you can, try to study notes that are printed out instead of the computer. just to change it up for yourself. Again, because a lot of this mental health burnout from the exam season and studying comes from relentlessly doling our mind on the same thing over and over and over. So the more you can diversify and change up how you are doing this and treating this experience, the more enjoyable it will be, and hopefully the better your mental health will be in the end. Now, of course, all of these tricks are helpful, but nothing will help your mental health and boost it like the fundamentals. Eating well, sleeping and getting enough rest, hydrating yourself and drinking enough water, seeing a therapist and doing self-talk and journaling, all of the fundamentals, deep breathing and mindfulness. Do not lose sight of those either. The more often you can practice them, the better your mental health will be, not just in exam season, but in life. Okay, now setting aside mental health, let's talk about just a couple of ways, top of mind tricks and tips that I think have been helpful for myself in my exam prep, and I've seen friends implement who have done very well as well. First thing that I would say, practice makes perfect. Study and really take all of the practice exams that you have at your disposal seriously. Replicate the testing conditions as much as you can. Take it seriously and make sure you study the answers to all of the practice exams that the professor or the teacher gives you. It's important because professors a lot of the time like to reuse the same types of challenge questions on final exams. So if you reviewed all of the exams and you understand exactly how these challenge questions can show up, you're going to be prepared, you're going to be ready, and you're going to crush it. Wear the same clothes that you wear while you're studying that you plan on wearing to the exam. Might sound weird, but there have been psychological studies that show that if you wear the same exact thing when you are studying a subject as when you take the exam, people tend to perform higher when they wore the same exact clothes. So I think the closer you can replicate everything, the environment, what you're wearing, what you were eating, as test day for whatever exam you're taking, hopefully the better. No matter what you are doing in life, get started early. Your future self will thank your past self when you get started early on exam prep, memorization, whatever it is. The earlier you start, the more material you can absorb, the more and deeper you can dive into the challenge questions, the better prepared you are going to be. Start as early as you can. Your mental health will thank you too. Okay, so now it's exam day and we have to deal with test and exam anxiety. And this is something that I've dealt with my whole life. It's a very, very challenging process. And of course, the worst part of it is that it can actually reduce your performance on the exam. So what do we do? Do not ever underestimate the power of a single, well-taken, deep breath. Whether you are doing a 5-5-7, inhale for 5 seconds, count them, hold for 5 seconds, count them, and exhale for 7 seconds. Or if it's just square breathing, inhale, hold, exhale, hold. Please remember my face and my voice when you are focused and you are stressed out on that exam day. Take a deep breath and take as many as you can. That will ground you. That will slow things down. That's the first layer of defense for test taking anxiety. Don't underestimate the power of a break, even if it's during the exam. If you need to take a moment because you're flustered and you're feeling overwhelmed, go outside and take some deep breaths. Go to the bathroom, wash your face. It's okay, and it's more efficient if you take just 2 minutes to yourself to take that break than to sit there and panic at the exam for 10, 20, 30 minutes. Do not ever underestimate taking a break. I used to do that all the time where I would walk and just clear my head, walk around campus for just a minute because I felt flustered during an exam, and I walked back in and I was ready, I was prepared, and I performed better because of it. Lastly, and I know I said this at the beginning of the video, but I'm going to say it again because it's worth repeating. Exams do not define your ability to succeed. I have so many friends who didn't do well on exams their whole life who are still massively successful. A lot of the time doing things like networking, meeting people, putting yourself out there, being entrepreneurial and innovative. Those are the things that matter more than any set of exams. Don't forget that, because if you are putting pressure on yourself, if you're stressing out, if you're freaking out about this exam and how you're going to perform on it, it's very likely that you think it matters that much. And I'm here to tell you, it matters a lot less than you think in that moment. And just remind yourself of that fact as often as you can. I know it's hard, but try your best to remind yourself of that fact. That's it for me, but let me know what your mental health tricks are for exam season down below in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe and show me some love if you feel like it. Much love, as always.